Hey, this is Buckley with CollabTalk, and I'm here with Kevin Crossman and going through and doing another MVP Buzz chat and getting to know other MVPs out in the community. And Kevin, thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Christian.
And so why don't you introduce yourself for folks that don't know you and where you're located, who you're working for, yada, yada.
Sure. I'm a Microsoft MVP for the last couple of years in the Office servers and services. It's mostly been a focus with Yammer and the Microsoft communities. In my day job, I'm an IT manager at Juniper Networks, and I manage the content collaboration side of Office 365. So that's SharePoint, Yammer, OneDrive, Teams, the content collaboration side of Teams,
yep.
And video, things like that. And I've been in the industry in that kind of role with various platforms for a number of years. And so right now we're using Microsoft, and I'm enjoying my time as an MVP, making connections with folks and learning from others, and hopefully giving back to the community as well.
Hey, Kevin, you're one of those people that I've talked with a few that, you had those experiences where you're talking with them. It's like, well, how long have you been an MVP? And like, oh, I'm not an MVP actually. But I mean, you were one of those people that, your name, you were involved in several of the different forums and on the Yammer communities and all those things, for years, see your name popping up and doing more speaking. But kind of what was your entrance into the MVP world?
Well, it's funny because in a previous life, we were a customer of Jive, and I was essentially in the same role with Jive. They had their champion program, which is basically their MVP program. And for a while, I was their #1 contributor to their user community that wasn't a Jive employee. And so being active in the user communities has been useful for me, adopting new platforms and then learning more about them, and especially in my role where I'm not just focused on one of the workloads or another, and I can't be an expert necessarily at all of those things. And so sometimes I need to tap into the community to solve a problem, or did anyone else see this error, or what is this new feature all about, or whatever.
Well, that's actually an important point too to make, is that MVPs are generally not just experts in like the product, and they generally are. But they're also, kind of experts from the business standpoint, kind of in the space. So whether they have a technical dev background, more of the admin IT pro, or even on the end user side of things, they're people that generally, can speak to where the technology fits within what the business is actually trying to go and accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it's interesting because I don't come to the IT professional role from a technical background. I'm not a programmer. HTML is my programming language of choice. It's not really a programming language. But I have a master's degree in library science, and I transitioned out of that, number of years now into IT. And so that has always been my role, is bridging the hardcore IT developer side with the business user side. And sometimes that's been in an IT role like I am now, and sometimes it's been in a business aligned role in like training departments or things like that.
I have to say that I remember in the late 80s, part of my undergrad, attending Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. I just am a stone's throw away from campus now, but running into one of my roommates was dating someone who was a library sciences major, and just thinking, what is that? And it's just funny getting into collaboration and knowledge management systems and hanging out with more and more of these people that have masters and PhDs in that area, and talking about taxonomy and metadata and information architecture, and how in fact, just had this conversation the other day with somebody who's saying, again, was asking, well, with all of the AI and machine learning and all those things out there, do we really need to do taxonomy, and do we need to think about metadata anymore? And it's like, yes, it's still a thing. It still needs to be done.
Yeah, it's funny for me because I got my master's like literally the last possible quarter before the web hit. And so, of course, it rendered that training essentially. So that was among the reasons why I switched careers into an IT role.
Yeah, well, it's a great space having that background and that knowledge. Especially, I mean, I spent a third of my career in technical program project management roles, and started my career as a tech writer and business analyst, and so having that perspective, I think, helps in problem solving in no matter what field it's in, but especially within IT, where one of the biggest problems is people jump out there with a technical solution before really understanding what it is they're trying to solve and whether that is the right path. And but anyway, it's well, as far as the technology, there's a lot of different topics that we can jump into around that. But kind of, where's your passion today? Like, what are you focusing on?
Well, it's interesting because as coming into the MVP role, starting with Yammer, and now that Microsoft's improved a lot of the other workloads and introduced new ones like Teams, and certainly in my role at my company, this Teams and Yammer thing is a common question, because it's really interesting. I wrote a blog post last year, and that basically looked at the post of a Yammer post and a post of a Teams post. And if you look just at the post itself, all the things are exactly the same. The avatar, the like button, the animated GIF, the at mention, it's exactly the same if you just look at the post. But of course, the post lives in the context of how frequent do the comments come? Who are you having the conversations with? And in those respects, the individual Teams and Yammer products are very much tuned for different use cases. Yeah. And trying to explain that has been kind of a thing that I've been doing a little bit of. I redid that talk as a presentation at the Seattle Office 365 user group when we were up in Seattle for the Microsoft MVP Summit. So I think that sort of like the differences between these things and why I would use one or the other has been, I think, a pretty common topic over the last year or so since Teams has come out. And
I just used the inner loop, outer loop slide in a presentation down in Auckland earlier this week. So yeah, I mean, it's I actually asked, because people were looking at it and like taking notes, and people, like, cameras came up. I said, have you seen this? Has anybody seen this before? And I had a fairly full audience there, well over 100 people, and 5 or 6 hands went up. That's people who had seen it before.
Yeah, I think that I think the inner loop and outer loop model has been really effective when it gets explained to people, and when I've explained it to my colleagues, they get it. And, but I think at the same point, that isn't the thing that Microsoft's going to necessarily put on their product website or something like that. They need it to be in the context of a pro, an MVP, right, RD, whatever, to explain it to people.
Yep.
And it's funny, that article was so popular that this week I found a version of it written by somebody else on a different blog site. And so I had a
interesting. Attributed to you, or
oh no.
Okay.
But used certain phrases that when I went to Google, only came 2 results: my post and this other post. So anyway, the website in question is doing the right thing, and they're going to rewrite it and give me some attribution. But it was funny. I was like, wow, someone else is getting this too. Oh.
Yeah, no,
it's super familiar.
Yeah, there's historically there's been a lot of stories like that, out there over the years of people appropriating content of others and not providing proper attribution. Look, I like on my blog, some people will reach out and say, "Hey, is it all right if I quote this article that you wrote?" I'm like, look, there's legal standards for doing that. I never asked permission of publicly available non-paid content that's out there, as long as I'm attributing back to the owner of that, and I always provide the link. And so that's what a cross link is and does. Right. But anyway, absolutely.
And it's interesting too, I think, with Teams, is that I still see a lot of people having sort of struggles with the user interface, and I kind of call these people Facebook people. It's like the Slack people get it, but the people that I'm dealing with that are coming from non-technical fields, our accounting team, our HR team, people like that are very familiar with Facebook. And while they can look at something like Yammer and go, okay, I see what this is, I can see how to use it. The whole UI with Teams, I think, is very unfamiliar to them, and I think in some ways is kind of scary. And it's unfortunate. It seems like Microsoft's kind of doubling down on this like command line orientation with Teams lately, and that's great for the Slack people, but it's not helpful for the Facebook people.
Right. I mean, there's great things of being able to go up and use that search bar and be able to more, to go from one place and find the different pieces and things out there. But you're right, it does need to be part of, and I have that inner loop, outer loop slide in a number of different presentations. One of my 2 sessions this week was on leveraging SharePoint through Teams. And there's no secret sauce around that. It's pretty simple. It's that, content inside of Teams is SharePoint, and that you could also have the ability to go add a tab or add your SharePoint libraries into the files tab that's already there and structure it so that you can have, you have the ability to go in and add 3 or 4 different ways to access existing SharePoint sites and content through a Teams site. And it's really not, anything complicated about how to go and do that, but it's intentionally, it's flexible around that. But I think the way that I tell the story, it's very similar story with Yammer. In my mind, there are very specific, clear, use cases around that. And if you have organizations that are using SharePoint and Teams and Yammer, that there are great flexible ways of bringing those different pieces together. I mean, so what's your 30-second pitch on Teams versus Yammer?
Well, I think that Yammer is great for open conversations. Some things that I think that have been really successful with Yammer is things like photo contests. So we're running one at our company now where we want people to wear a certain logo shirt or their favorite swag or whatever, post a picture, use a hashtag, but it's in Yammer because then anyone can discover it and get to it. But that would never work in Teams because I have to join the group, I have to load the app, I have to do all these other things. And so for open conversations of communities of interest or things like that, it's a much better platform for that.
Well, and that's the problem with you had like the product team that came out with these scenarios of like, well, then you go and add all 5,000 people in your company to the teams. I'm like, whoa. Like that's not its strength. That's not how I use it. It's not how any customers I work with are using it, where they add everyone into each of these teams. They're like, Yammer is better for that. And honestly, just having a DL, have a group that's created, but emailing everybody for those kinds of broadcasts might even be a better model than put everybody inside of a team.
Yeah, I get the problem that the Teams folks have is that if I'm a brand new Teams user and I just load the app and no one's invited me into Teams, what am I going to see? And we can talk about maybe the UI for adding Teams is maybe could be improved. But the idea of having everybody have at least one team that they're automatically added to so that they get some context, I think I get in a way why they did that. But to your point, I don't think that's a good experience for anybody.
Just to be added in, right. Well, there almost needs to be something like when they launched the Microsoft Tech Community is a great example of that. And you're a new user you're on there. As part of that discovery process is by serving up, well, based on your interests, here's the groups that we suggest, the ones that are public, that are open, that you can, self-nominate for and join to those communities. And so Yammer is like that, where you can go in and find out, search, and discover on those various topics, and then join the ones that are relevant. Maybe there needs to be a similar experience within Teams, but I don't believe that the right way to do that. If you're joining your new employee and I'm the employer, I'm going to go, well, I do this with my employees now. I've got 4 employees. I set them up with email. I set them up inside of Teams, and I then add them to the ones that I think are relevant to what they need to go and do.
Right. But even if you as the manager didn't do that, if me as the new employee went in and launched Teams and it said, these are teams that are people that you work with, your manager, your coworkers, that your direct line coworkers also are members of, add me, they're public, that would be great. Yeah. But it doesn't do that. So, hopefully that's something they can improve, because I think that onboarding experience is really kind of broken right now in Teams. which is unfortunate because once people are in it and in your project team or your department team or whatever, once you adopt it, I think it's a great way to communicate and foster closer connections with those people you're working with. I know with my own team, it's been very effective when we got somebody who transferred from another IT department into our team, and it was great to be able to bring them in, welcome them, and he could get up to speed with all the past conversations.
Right. And it's, on that discovery process too, I think it can't be understated how important that is. There's a reason why, if you look at the success of the social platforms, but even how the search experiences through through Google, through Bing, through Yahoo, through any of the lesser ones that are out there that all do very similar things, which is they've decided they've discovered, to use that too many times, to use the white space that's around that for discovery activities. Facebook is a great example of that, where you're getting as part of your news feed blended into the things that you're doing, but also what your friends are doing. And it's constantly suggesting, hey, friends that have joined this and you have these activities, you're in conversations, we suggest these sites. Or, hey, you in the news feed, somebody mentioned you or this. All of those are discovery opportunities to go elsewhere. And so when you think of successful collaboration, adopting those types of public social network best practices, being able, feeding you information of things that you may never know to go and look for. Like once you're in a system, like I rarely go in, even in Yammer communities, which I go into Yammer almost every day. I get email notifications of different conversations and reminders. I'm reading stuff of these broader communities, just like I live and work inside of teams every day, both of which have their SharePoint components that are behind all of that. But that I rarely go in and be like, oh, I've not looked in a while. What other new communities are out there within Yammer and elsewhere? Like once I fit those pieces. So unless there's some way that the system is coming back to me and saying, hey, you should look at, I will never go look for new things on my own. I'm busy,
Right, of course. Well, and Yammer is pretty good about, they have that discovery feed. So if there is a popular group or discussion that's happening in something you're not necessarily following, it presents it to you, and also does that in the email digest too. So I think Yammer's doing a good job of giving you some opportunities to not have to go hunting for new groups all the time.
Well, that's something but you have to, like with your background, just like with mine and collaboration platforms in general, is recognize that we've always had those engagement adoption issues with all of these platforms that these systems and tools that we've used, and that solves so many of them if you're able to automate that based on those patterns of activity in your connections, making those suggestions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's anything else going on? Like let me ask this first, Kevin. So how can people get in touch with you?
Well, probably the best way, I'm on Twitter as Kevin Crossman, and I'm on LinkedIn as Kevin Crossman. So those are good places to reach out. My Twitter feed is definitely not solely professional. You're going to get a lot of insight to my interest in sports and politics and tiki drinks and everything else. So, but I also do, work-related Microsoft Office 365 related tweets and posts and things like that.
And you can find a lot of Kevin's content under other people's names on other blogs around the world. So that's
sure. Yes, absolutely.
So that's awesome. All right. Well, Kevin, great, talking to you, catching up, and good to see you again. I don't know when I see you next. Are you going to be in Vegas?
I will not be in Vegas, but I'll be at Orlando for.
Definitely see you at Ignite this fall. So Kevin, thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you soon.
Always a pleasure.